said, "You're a failure at life." Then the rest of the family joined her, their laughter bouncing around the dining room. Amani didn't argue, didn't explain, didn't even look at them. She simply stood up, pushed her chair back, and walked out into the cold Njoro Hills night. The air stung her cheeks, but it felt better than staying at that table. What they didn't know was that Amani had been working quietly on a logistics startup for 2 years. Late nights, early mornings, learning everything on her own. She kept it secret so no one could tear it down before it grew. And now, just hours after they mocked her, everything was about to change. The next morning, her phone buzzed nonstop. A major investor had just wired $3 million into her company. Her startup was officially taking off. As she sat on her small balcony drinking tea, her phone rang again and again. Suddenly her family wanted to talk. Suddenly they had been proud all along. The same people who laughed at her were now begging for her time, her attention, her forgiveness. Amani just smiled softly. Success had spoken for her, louder than she ever could. The party in Zambezi View was loud and full of laughter, but Ira felt small the entire night. She tried to stay quiet, helping set plates and greeting relatives. Then, right in the middle of dinner, her sister Nandira stood up and said loudly, "Why are we even pretending? Ira has achieved nothing in her life." The room went silent for a second, and then a few people laughed. Some looked away, pretending they didn't hear. Ira felt the words hit her like a slap, but she didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She simply picked up her small bag, pushed back her chair, and walked out of the house as calmly as if she were just stepping outside for air. Outside, the night was warm, but her chest felt cold. She walked down the road alone, blinking back tears she refused to let fall. She kept hearing Nandira's voice in her head. Achieved nothing. If only they knew how hard she'd been working on her little app idea. How many nights she stayed up sketching designs, teaching herself code, and testing features on an old laptop that overheated every hour. But she didn't explain herself. She never did. She believed that one day her work would speak for her. And it did. Just a few weeks later, everything changed. Ira posted the beta version of her app online, thinking only a handful of people would try it. Instead, thousands downloaded it in a single night. Influencers shared it. Radio stations discussed it. People across Africa started using it, praising how easy and smart it was. Within days, the story of the quiet girl from Zambezi View who built the innovative app exploded online. Reporters called her the silent genius, the woman who let results talk instead of words. She barely had time to breathe. Startup founders messaged her. Investors flew in asking for meetings. CEOs wanted her ideas. Suddenly, Ira was sitting in boardrooms, not living rooms filled with insults. And that's when Nandira called. At first it was one message, then 10, then long voice notes pretending nothing had happened. "Hey sis, we should catch up. I always knew you were smart. We're all proud of you." But Ira didn't answer. She didn't block her either. She just let the silence sit exactly where it belonged. One afternoon, while Ira was preparing for a big partnership meeting, her phone buzzed again. It was Nandira begging this time. "Please call me. I miss you." Ira looked at the message for a long moment. Then she put her phone down and walked into the meeting room with her head high. She wasn't the girl they mocked anymore. She was building something big, something she earned alone. Ira had finally found her place, among builders, visionaries, and people who believed in her. And she didn't plan on ever returning to the people who didn't. The afternoon sun in Katima village was warm, but inside the crowded living room, Zola felt frozen. Relatives filled every chair, chatting and laughing, until her sister Weeksa stood up with that sharp smile she always used when she was about to embarrass someone. "Let's be honest," she said loudly. "Zola is the disappointment of the family." The room went silent. Then a few cousins let out awkward laughs. Someone shook their head as if they expected this. Zola felt her throat close up and her eyes burned. She looked around hoping someone, anyone, would defend her. No one did. They all just stared. Zola stood up slowly, wiping away the tear that slipped down her cheek. She didn't argue or ask why. She simply walked out of the house and onto the dusty road, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. Leaving wasn't dramatic for her. It was survival. She couldn't breathe in that room anymore. Her tiny rented room in the village center had thin walls and a weak bulb, but it was quiet. It was hers. And in that quiet, Zola poured all her pain, anger, and shame into sketching. She sketched designs until her fingers cramped. She learned to sew on a second-hand machine that broke every week. She watched online tutorials with slow Wi-Fi and saved every coin to buy fabric. Every insult, every memory of Weeks's voice echoing in her mind pushed her to work harder. She didn't want revenge. She wanted freedom. Months passed. Slowly, people began to notice her bold colors, her unique cuts, the way her designs looked like stories stitched into fabric. A fashion blogger found her page and posted about her. Orders started coming in. Then a designer from the city invited her to collaborate. And then it happened, the moment she used to daydream about in that tiny room. Her collection was selected for a major runway event. Zola couldn't believe it. Her name, her designs, her dream, finally on a stage she once thought was impossible. On the day of the show, as she stepped out of her car in a simple but stunning outfit she made herself, she heard someone call her name. She turned and saw Weeksa, dressed in her best clothes, her makeup carefully done, but her eyes full of panic. "Zola, please. Can you get me a seat inside? I'm your sister," she begged, touching her arm as if they'd always been close. For a moment, Zola felt the old ache in her chest. But then she remembered the girl who walked out of that living room, the girl who cried alone in a rented room but kept going. Zola gently removed Weeks's hand from her arm. "I hope you enjoy the show," she said softly. Then she turned and walked past her without looking back. Inside, the lights were bright, the crowd buzzing, the runway shining, and Zola finally felt seen, not for who her family said she was, but for who she had become. The New Year's dinner in Lyra City was supposed to be warm and joyful, but Naria felt uneasy the whole night. Her family had a way of turning celebrations into moments of embarrassment, and deep down, she feared this would be one of those nights. She tried to stay quiet, serving food and smiling politely. But then Aiken, her older sister who loved attention, stood up and tapped her glass. With a dramatic voice, she said, "As we begin a new year, let's face the truth. Naria will never be anything." For a moment, the room froze. Then people actually clapped. Few laughed. Some nodded as if it was a fact they'd all agreed on long ago. The words hit Naria in the chest so hard she felt her breath leave her body. But instead of crying or arguing, she stood up slowly, straightened her dress, and walked out the front door without looking at anyone. Outside, the night was cool and full of fireworks, but her heart was burning. She walked through the streets of Lyra City with tears she wiped away quickly, refusing to let them fall too long. Everyone inside believed she would never become anything, but she was tired of letting them define her. She decided, right there on the sidewalk, that she would choose herself. The next morning, she emptied her last savings, money she'd been carefully collecting for emergencies, into an idea she'd been too scared to pursue: a food delivery service. Just her, an old motorcycle she rented by the hour, and a passion for cooking that had always lived quietly inside her. She cooked meals in her tiny kitchen and delivered them herself. First, orders were slow. Some days she didn't make enough to cover fuel, but she kept pushing. She posted online every day, handing out flyers, offering free delivery, building relationships with customers. People started calling her the girl with the warm food and warm smile. Word spread fast. Within a few months, everything changed. Restaurants wanted to partner with her. Schools called. Offices placed huge orders. Soon, she had riders, branded uniforms, and a small office. What started with her last savings became the biggest food delivery service in the region. Investors began reaching out. Newspapers wanted interviews. People were amazed at the quiet girl who had built an empire from nothing. And then came the next new year. This time, Naria didn't walk. She arrived in a luxury SUV, followed by security and a small media team filming a documentary about her rise. When she stepped out, relatives rushed to greet her, shocked at the transformation. Aiken stood near the door, speechless, her mouth slightly open as she watched cameras follow the sister she once called nothing. Naria walked past her calmly, the same way she had walked out a year before, But this time she held her head high. She didn't need revenge. Her success had already said everything. The dinner table in Irungu Meadows was polished and perfect, but Molly felt completely out of place. Her family loved showing off. New cars, new jewelry, new promotions. Molly stayed quiet, as always, eating slowly and hoping the night would pass without drama. But her sister Cora, who never missed a chance to embarrass her, leaned back in her chair and said loudly, "You know, we all work so hard to keep this family going, except Molly. She's the family burden." Few relatives chuckled. Some hid their smiles behind their glasses. No one defended her. To them it was just another joke. But to Molly, it felt like her heart cracked open. She didn't say a word. She simply pushed her chair back, stood up, and walked away from the table. The laughter continued as she stepped outside. But once the door closed behind her, she let out a shaky breath. Nobody in that house knew the truth. Molly had been working quietly for months on a robotics prototype. Late nights, early mornings, barely any sleep. Her room was filled with wires, codes on sticky notes, half-finished circuits, and tools she bought from her tiny savings. She didn't tell her family because they never believed she could do anything worthy. They always saw her as the weak one, the slow one, the burden. But Molly had a vision, and she believed in it more than she believed in anything her family had ever said about her. After months of testing, breaking, rebuilding, and fixing, she finally finished it. A small but powerful robotic system that could transform warehouse work and packaging. She submitted it to a tech exhibition quietly, with no expectations. A week later, everything changed. A major tech giant reached out and asked for a meeting. They loved her idea. They loved her design. And within days, they offered to buy the full rights for a life-changing amount, enough to make Molly a millionaire instantly. She sat in their glass conference room, stunned, while they talked about expanding her idea globally. For the first time, people saw her brilliance, not her silence. As the news spread online, Molly's phone lit up non-stop. But the most persistent caller was Cora. Message after message, call after call. Long voice notes pretending she had always been supportive. "Molly, I'm so proud of you. We should talk. Let's celebrate together." But Molly didn't answer. Not even once. She hired an assistant to help manage her new schedule. And one morning, when Cora called again, the assistant answered with a calm, professional voice. "Hello. Yes, Molly received your messages. She's busy living her successful life. If she needs anything from you, she will reach out." Silence on the other end. Molly heard about it later and simply smiled. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She had done the one thing nobody believed she could do. She changed her own life. And now, she walked into every room knowing she was never the burden. She was the breakthrough. The dinner table in Shunny Springs was full of laughter, but Fayola felt small the whole evening. She sat quietly, hoping to get through the night without anyone mentioning her situation. But Nyota, her older sister who loved an audience, looked straight at the aunts and said loudly, "Imagine being grown and still jobless like Fayola. Honestly, it's embarrassing." The table went silent for a moment, then the aunts exchanged looks and whispered. A few cousins chuckled under their breath. Fayola felt her face heat up, her stomach twist. She stared down at her untouched plate, wishing she could disappear. But instead of crying or defending herself, she pushed her chair back gently, stood up, and walked out of the house. She didn't say a single word. She didn't have to. Her silence hurt more than any argument. Outside, the cool air hit her face. She walked all the way back to her tiny room. A single bed, peeling paint, and a small desk that shook every time she wrote on it. She sat on her bed and let the tears fall, but only for a moment. Then something inside her shifted. She grabbed her old phone, opened the camera, and started talking. She talked about pain, about feeling judged, about starting from nothing, about getting up every day even when life felt heavy. She didn't pretend to be perfect. She didn't fake confidence. She just spoke honestly. She posted the video online, thinking maybe 10 people would see it. But the next morning, her phone was exploding. Thousands from all over Africa and beyond were sharing her clip, saying her words felt like a hug, a mirror, a push. "Who is this girl? She's so real. We need more voices like hers." That one video changed everything. Suddenly, brands were emailing her. Motivational pages wanted to repost her content. Event organizers invited her to speak. She bought a better phone, better lighting, better equipment, and turned her small room into a tiny studio. Every video she posted went viral. She talked about survival, heartbreak, disappointment, and hope. People loved her honesty. They loved her courage. They loved her. Years passed, and Fayola grew into a full-blown influencer, speaker, and brand ambassador. She traveled, she inspired, she built her own business. And one day, she decided to visit home again. When she walked into Shunny Springs, everything stopped. The same relatives who once whispered about her now rushed toward her with excitement. Even Nyota, who once humiliated her, ran forward smiling wide as if nothing had happened. "Fayola, take a selfie with us," she cried. Fayola smiled politely, posing for photos, but inside she felt a quiet victory. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to prove anything. She had simply become the woman she always knew she could be. And now, the people who once mocked her were standing in line just to stand beside her. The New Year party at Morique Lodge was loud, colorful, and full of energy. Music played, people danced, and relatives moved from table to table catching up on the year's gossip. Adia tried to blend into the background, hoping the night would pass without her sister Keziah turning her into a joke. But of course, Keziah loved attention too much to let that happen. Right when everyone gathered to make a toast, Keziah raised her voice and said, "Before we celebrate, can we acknowledge something? Adia has no future." The room went silent first, then some people laughed nervously. Few uncles nodded like they agreed. Adia felt a small cut form inside her chest, but she didn't show it. She simply stood up, gave a tight smile that hid her pain, and walked out of the lodge while the music continued behind her. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. She hugged her arms around herself as she walked to the gate, trying to swallow the sting of her sister's words. She had always been the quiet one, the slow one, the one people thought would fade into the background. But something inside her shifted that night. For the first time, she realized she had to stop living in the shadow of her family's opinions. The very next day, she searched online for opportunities and found a digital skills bootcamp starting soon. It cost almost all the money she had saved, but she signed up anyway. The classes were hard. Long hours, complex coding, confusing security systems. But Adia pushed through. She stayed late, asked questions, practiced until her eyes burned. She discovered she had a talent for cybersecurity, a talent no one in her family even knew existed. Months later, with help from mentors and classmates, she launched her own small cybersecurity firm. At first, she worked alone in a tiny office with peeling paint and second-hand equipment. But she was brilliant and word spread quickly. Businesses trusted her. Organizations recommended her. And then came the contract that changed everything. A major government department needed cybersecurity support, and they chose her company. Overnight, Adia became a rising star in the tech world. Interviews, conferences, newspaper features. Everyone wanted to hear her story. Everyone except the people who once mocked her, who were now shocked into silence. Then one afternoon her phone rang. It was Keziah. Her voice was suddenly sweet, gentle, almost desperate. "Adia, I'm proud of you. I was wondering if you could help me get a job at your company." Adia took a deep breath, remembering the pain of that night, the humiliation, the tight smile she wore as she walked out. But she wasn't bitter. She was simply done letting people like Keziah shrink her spirit. With calm confidence, she replied, "We hire people who believe in others." There was a long silence on the other end. Adia didn't fill it. She simply ended the call and went back to work, building the future she created for herself, one her sister said she'd never have. The salty breeze in Makuzi Bay drifted through the open windows as the family gathered for dinner. Laughter filled the room, but Tisa felt uneasy. She had been struggling for months, and she knew her sister Miremba could never resist throwing a jab when everyone was watching. And she was right. In the middle of dinner, with everyone eating and talking, Miremba suddenly said loudly, "Honestly, Tisa is broke and talentless. I don't even know what she's doing with her life." The room went silent, then small whispers started. A few relatives shook their heads. Someone giggled. Tisa froze for a moment, feeling her cheeks burn. The words hit her like a wave, sharp, cold, and humiliating. But she didn't argue. She stood up quietly, pushed her chair back, and walked out of the house while the laughter grew behind her. Outside, she walked straight to the ocean. The moonlight reflected on the water, and the waves crashed softly against the shore. She let out a long, shaky breath. Tears fell, but she wiped them quickly. Standing there with the sound of the sea around her, she began to remember something, her dream of owning a bakery. She used to bake when she was happy, when she was stressed, when she needed comfort. Baking had always been her safe place. That night, she decided she would start again. The next morning, she went to the market, bought the cheapest ingredients she could afford, and returned to her little kitchen. She baked muffins, donuts, buns, and pastries until the room smelled like hope. She took photos with her old phone and posted them online. She expected maybe a few likes from friends, but instead they wanted prices. They wanted deliveries. Within weeks, one of her pastry videos went viral. Millions of views, thousands of shares. Her unique flavors and perfect designs caught the entire country's attention. Orders flooded in faster than she could bake. She hired helpers, bought better equipment, and turned her kitchen business into a full bakery brand. Posters, commercials, collaborations. Everyone wanted a piece of Tisa's magic. Meanwhile, Miremba watched from the sidelines, shocked. At first, she pretended to be supportive. Then she tried to take credit, telling people she always encouraged Tisa, that she helped her start. But Tisa was tired of pretending. One day, when a journalist asked about her sister's support, Tisa posted screenshots. Every insult, every mocking message, every time Miremba had called her broke, useless, or wasting time. She didn't say a single harsh word. She just posted the truth. The internet exploded. People dragged Miremba for lying, for bullying, for trying to steal credit from someone she had once crushed. Her reputation collapsed overnight. And Tisa, she kept baking, kept smiling, and kept rising. She didn't need revenge. She just let the truth speak, and the world listened. At the New Year feast in Ronga Ridge, the whole house was glowing with music, laughter, and the smell of roasted spices, except for the moment Kilia's sister Zara decided to strike. It happened so quickly Kilia almost didn't catch it. Zara lifted her glass, fake smile stretched tight, and said loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Some of us actually did something with our education. Others just wasted it." Right, Kilia. The room went painfully quiet. A few forks froze mid-air. Kilia felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she didn't give Zara the satisfaction of snapping back. She simply pushed her chair back, stood up with a small, calm smile and said, "Happy New Year, everyone." Then she walked out. No yelling, no scene. Just quiet dignity that spoke louder than anything Zara could have said. Outside, the night air bit at her skin, but honestly, she had never felt clearer. For years Zara had mocked her for wanting to teach, for not chasing some big fancy job, for caring too much about community. But that night, Kilia decided she was finally done letting her sister's voice drown out her own. The next week, she started small. Just a few kids from her neighborhood gathered on her porch, notebooks in their laps, eager faces waiting for her to begin. Then more children came. Then a few adults asked if they could join. She taught everything: reading, math, computer basics, whatever they needed. People started sharing videos of her classes online. And suddenly, something that began as a quiet act of healing started spreading across the city. Before long, a local reporter showed up, then another. Interviews, photos, a news clip that went viral overnight. A non-profit reached out and said, "We love what you're doing. How would you feel about having your own learning center?" Kilia cried right there on the phone. Within months, the center opened. Bright walls, donated laptops, shelves full of books, and her name on the sign outside. A year later, Kilia stood on a national stage, hands trembling as she received an award for Community Educator of the Year. Cameras flashed. People cheered. Her students, hundreds of them now, sent her videos thanking her for changing their lives. She felt like she was glowing from the inside out. Meanwhile, back in Ronga Ridge, reporters kept knocking on Zara's door, asking how it felt to see her sister changing the country. Zara didn't answer. She hid behind her curtains, avoiding the spotlight she'd always chased, because now it belonged to Kelia. And Kelia, she wasn't thinking about revenge. She wasn't thinking about proving anyone wrong. She was thinking about her students, her community, and the quiet power of believing in yourself even when the people closest to you don't. At the New Year celebration in Mwamba Heights, the house was loud with laughter, clinking glasses, and relatives catching up after months apart. Lindau tried to enjoy it, smiling politely, helping serve food, doing her best to stay out of the drama she knew her sister Asha loved to start. But of course, Asha couldn't help herself. Right in front of everyone, uncles, aunties, cousins, Asha leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms and said, "Lindau, honestly, you'll never amount to anything. You're too slow, too soft, too nothing." The whole room went quiet. Someone dropped a spoon. Even the music suddenly felt too loud. Lindau felt her heart squeeze, the sting traveling straight to her eyes. But she refused to let a single tear fall. Instead, she inhaled slowly, placed her napkin on the table, and said in the softest, calmest voice, "I'm going to head out. Enjoy the rest of the night." Then she walked away. No shouting, no arguing, just a quiet exit that somehow held more strength than any comeback she could have thrown. 2 weeks later, Lindau packed one suitcase and took a bus to the capital city. She had no connections, no big plan, just a heart full of determination and a mind that refused to replay Asha's words anymore. She started a tiny cleaning service. At first, it was just her, mopping floors, washing windows, scrubbing bathrooms, sometimes working until sunrise. But she showed up on time every time. She gave her best, even when no one was watching. Slowly, doors opened. One hotel manager recommended her to another. Then a small hotel chain signed a contract with her. Then a major luxury hotel did too. Within 2 years, she had a real company. Uniforms, a beautiful office, a fleet of vehicles with her company logo, and hundreds of employees who called her boss lady. When the next New Year celebration rolled around, Lindau drove back to Mwamba Heights in a gleaming luxury SUV. As she stepped out, confident, smiling, glowing with the life she built, everyone stared. Asha opened her mouth like she had something smart to say, but nothing came out. She just stood there, speechless. And Lindau, she simply walked inside, greeted everyone warmly, and carried herself with the quiet pride of a woman who learned that sometimes the best revenge is creating a life that leaves